Thank you, Robert, and thank you for sharing your space with us today. I see some familiar names over in the chat. So some of our community mental health center partners, it's been around a long time and may remember the old wraparound model. I think it was Can Focus. That kind of ages me a little bit. But agencies working together was kind of formed by a conversation that Jenny Westerman and I and my assistant regional director, Stephanie Sim, who couldn't join us today, but she leads our agencies working together. And Jill all had a conversation about how can we mimic kind of the wraparound using technology. And so we started talking about Microsoft Teams as a mechanism to do some wraparound. So first I want to show the why this work is important. Next slide. This is a representation of the reasons children enter foster care. So if you look at state fiscal year 24, 39% of children entering foster care was related to FINAS, Families in Need of Assessment. So what that tells us is that if these families were reached maybe earlier on, we would have been able to prevent children being removed from their home for FINAS, which is basically a lack of resources. It could be housing, utilities, bed bugs, behavioral health unmet needs. So there's a wide variety of why a child could come into foster care because of this. Next slide. So the Protection Report Center receives a little over 91,000 reports. That was for last fiscal year. We know that education personnel is the highest reporter at 24%, and we know, that's for a very good reason. Schools are most closely connected to children and families. They spend a great deal of time with children and families, and so we appreciate the partnership. And we know that you need as many resources as you can, and we're working very hard to partner with our schools and our other community agencies to meet those needs. So in 2023, 39%, again, were related to FINAS, which I've already shared. And in Southeast Kansas, 73% of removals were not requested by DCF. So just a little quick overview of how the system works. If a child comes to our attention, either through PRC or sometimes police protected custody, we go out and assess. And if we believe that we can wrap services around a family and keep that child with their family or with a relative, we make a recommendation to the court. The court can either take that recommendation and follow our safety plan, or they can remove a child and place it into foster care. In 2023, 73% of the removals were not requested by DCF. So that's a big red flag that we need to do better on the prevention end so that we don't end up in court. Next slide. So to kind of give an overview for just Southeast Kansas, which is 16 counties in Southeast Kansas, we know that there's around 400 children entering foster care each year. And to date, we have 206 children who have been removed from their homes for various reasons. And we also know that if we continue on this path, that at the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th, we're going to have about 83 less children in state custody. We're pretty excited about that. So agencies working together, we believe, is a big part of that, along with some other family first prevention services. Next slide. So a little bit about community agencies working together, and there's several members I see on the call that are a part of that. And I think possibly the best part of my career at DCF is seeing this happen. So we have a monthly meeting, virtual meeting led by Stephanie. We share data, we share new resources, we learn together. Many of our resources come into communities quickly, and it's overwhelming. So we learn about new resources, we stay connected, we support families. The goal is to support those families who have those poverty issues. And that's why we all do our work. Our goal is to get in as quickly as possible. So this agency's working together. We have the monthly meeting. We also have this chat that is open to just those agencies that kind of do intensive work with families or are experts in their field. So it's not every coalition member that you may work with. It's really those supportive services. So if a family has a need, you as a member of this team can go on, list your need, no identifying information, just maybe county, ages, situation. And this community of helpers kind of swarm is the word I would use, swarm this family's need. And I'll be able to share an example of that here in just a few minutes. We also support each other. So as we have a lot of staff turnover, we know that people come in, they want to help families, they just don't know what's out there. So excellent way to help new staff get grounded in the resources in our community. And we stay connected. And I think Robert mentioned earlier the importance of staying connected as a community to help our families. Next slide. So this is our largest needs with agencies working together. No surprise that housing is our #1 need. It's so important to a family's stability. Lots of issues around housing, lack of housing, substandard housing. So that's the highest. Behavioral health, no surprise there. I think that there's a misconception that if a child needs behavioral health services, referring them to DCF or the PRC will get them services quicker. As I think many of us know, our mental health providers are on here. That slows things down. Children don't get services quicker when they go to foster care. Utilities, another huge need. And collectively working together, we can all contribute that. DCF does not have an unlimited supply of money for utilities. And it's important to note that in order to get help from DCF with these kinds of things, a case has to be open. And if a case is open, DCF becomes involved in a family's life, and it's not always making the situation easier. There's a lot of distrust with DCF. We know the schools are trusted more than DCF, and so we want to help support schools meet all of these needs. Bugs. I mean, if you work with children, you know, it's a huge issue and it's an expensive issue. And we all, again, collectively pool our money together, our resources together, and help with those needs. Some of our needs are from grandparents trying to take care of their grandchildren, food, healthcare, parenting, home goods. But those top 4 right there are probably our biggest need. And I will share an example. Next slide. Jill and Jenny, if I misstate anything or overlook anything, please jump in. Stephanie usually does this presentation. She does it very well, so I'm kind of pinch hitting for her. So here's an example. Vic Warman with Community Crisis Team isn't a posting member, so he contacted Stephanie. She presented this scenario to our agencies working together. So this is a typical need for a family. They had bed bugs. The dad had 3 teenagers. Dad was disabled on SSI, older son working part-time. The landlord wouldn't help. The MCO, or managed care organization, didn't cover the expense of bed bugs. The bug treatment company, had agreed to reduce the charge to $2,200. So Vic was asking if there was any agencies that could help this family. He had $800 to help towards the bill. So that was posted at 9/14. And by, looks like we had 35 responses. And it looked like by 11:30, that family's needs were met. Some other resources that were put towards this family was helping the kids apply for some sort of benefit because the father was disabled. I believe Jill and Jenny, if you can remember this family.
It was
What-
SSI,
Yes,
Anita. It was SSI. I
Oh.
tell this story a lot.
yes, yes. So we helped with many things with this family. DCF helped get his application for LEAP, I believe. We got some food assistance.
Got the kids on Medicaid.
Yes, that is so huge for kids to have medical care. And if they have a medical card, there's a number on the back, which I learned through agencies working together, that if a child has a medical card, there is care coordination offered on the back of that card. It doesn't automatically come as a benefit. You have to call and ask for it. There's just so many resources that can be used with a family. Another example was a mother with a couple of kids, I think, in Ottawa, that they couldn't pay their utility bill. One of the kids had asthma. The person on our agency working together said that was a medical need, check with your MCO. As a matter of fact, the MCO could help with the utility bill because the child needed the breathing treatments for their asthma. So it's phenomenal to see all the ins and outs that we cannot be experts at, that somebody on this team is. So, next slide. How schools can help. We want to support you early on in a family's life. I think our connection with Robert is one of those things that just happen when the stars align. They have community health workers that are working with the school. We have response advocates. Our community mental health centers, of course, have mental health in school. Greenbush, which if you're not familiar with Jenny, Jenny's a great resource and she's gonna help us answer some questions later on. So again, it's the amount of resources in a community are so complex and ever changing. This agency working together really helps us all stay connected. If you're not aware, 1-800-CHILDREN is an organization that has resource lists that you can tap into. It's also a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week helpline for parents. We also have our Family Mobile Crisis Helpline. That number's listed on the screen, that any family member, anybody can use to call if they're having a mental health crisis. So we just want schools to reach out to us, to your community partners, to help these children, help these families as early as possible. And Greenbush, next slide. As a result of this work and conversation with Jenny, developed a resource list on their website. You can access that there. This is by school district and county and community. That lists many resources that you can use, refer to families for assistance. So did I hit all the main points, Jill, Jenny, Robert?
Yeah, I think it may sound simple, but it's not simple. And the thing I've learned in my career in 25 years is just getting people in the same room to know each other, to know what they have, what's available, and work on a problem collaboratively makes all the difference. And communication isn't difficult because we don't want to communicate. It's difficult because we don't know how to develop the processes. And these are just two different approaches, or kind of complementary approaches, actually, to help make communication possible so everybody can work together, which is the key.
And I would like to mention that technology has its challenges. We know that schools usually use the Google platform at DCF. We use Microsoft Teams. Jill is our community engagement coordinator. She's the one who sends out invitations to join our group. You have to get it from her to be able to join the Microsoft team agencies working together to have that chat open. So if you're a school or an organization that has trouble with Microsoft Teams, but you would like to post on here, let Jill know, and she can even come out to your location and help you get signed up. So,
And I have on my to-do list, I'm working on how do we develop sort of a resource that is, sort of web-based and it's kind of not software dependent, in terms of, we know that not everyone has access to every software. And so, we're still, I think, exploring, and we know that the Teams is working and it's working incredibly well. But also this is getting bigger and more complex, and we want to make sure that we're able to really have a solution that is easy for everyone to use and everyone to communicate, because that's the key, is that everybody know what's going on and be able to kind of add their part.
so somebody did ask, and I would just mention that this is for the Southeast region, so it's those 16 counties that we cover. And at this time, it hasn't expanded, but I think, as people see the benefits to this, and again, as Robert said, it's so simple. I expect it to spread across the state, and actually we may be asking Robert and some of his community health workers to help us with a commercial that we're going to use at our campus practice model showcase. So, yeah, right now it's just limited to Southeast campus.
But to be real honest, we've gotten referrals from all over the state, and we just some of us just help direct them toward the appropriate resources, because I seriously do not know all the resources in Goodland, Kansas, but at least we can point them to and encourage them to work with their partners. So I think there's a want out there to have something like this across the state. I think there's a need. I mean, I think we just look at how many we deal with. I mean, the chat has been busy this morning already. So,
Stay tuned. That's what we're gonna say. Stay tuned.
And we certainly, one of the things that we're talking about are some of these approaches that we're taking in one location, because we're here to help everyone. And if you're interested in doing something like this or beginning something like this in your community, we're certainly here to kind of tell you how we did it, walk through the steps, help you problem solve. That's what these echoes are about, is really helping people think about how they could do similar things or how they could meet needs in their community. Maybe you have a great idea we haven't even thought of. Christy, I think we're ready for the next slide. So just really quickly, just want to make sure that people have a chance to ask any questions, or if there's something about the model or the approach that you don't understand, please feel free to unmute or type in the chat. And as we're waiting to hear from you, let's go on to the next slide. So are there any questions that people on the call on the Echo have before we kind of go into some of the questions we've come up with?
Can I make a quick observation, Robert?
Sure.
I think it's really wonderful to see that we're on track as a state to have 83 less kids in custody this year. And I have seen Anita, and I have seen Jill, and I have seen so many people from DCF getting so involved in all of these community organizations. and working with the family resource advocates and the community health workers and just all of the coordination that has happened. And because more people know what is out there and how to help families and get them connected with resources, I just can't help but feel like that, less kids in custody is a direct result of the work, the partnerships that are happening. It's just a really exciting thing to see. So thank you, Anita, for all the work your group is doing.
Thank you, Melinda.
And I have to say, we have funding, and we're very fortunate to have funding that allows us to kind of innovate and try some of these ideas in Southeast Kansas. We at Telehealth Rocks, but DCF has taken this on without additional funding, and we really appreciate their commitment. But also, the commitment is because we know that we want every child that needs to be protected to be protected. I will say this: I'm not a DCF person, but I think we all care about kids, and we all want best for kids. But we also know that if we can intervene earlier, we can help families so that they don't end up and the child doesn't end up having a traumatic experience. Not every kid, we can intervene early. We can help families with their needs. We can help get resources together. But we understand that this is just adding a prevention component to the work to protect and meet the needs of all kids. So wanted to ask a couple questions before we move into the next part of our presentation. I'm really interested, the thing I hear constantly is we want schools to know about this. We know that schools are struggling with kids' needs. And so just really curious about, how can schools be involved and how can the involvement of schools in kind of working and bringing things to, all the different organizations that work together and agencies working together, how can that help kids and families? I'm going to call on Jenny because I know you work with a lot of school districts and you've often served as a kind of an intermediary working to kind of get these resources and this, knowledge of this out in the community.
So, I feel like I have a good perspective because I worked in the school system for 26 years and I've also worked in social services. Schools are quite often the family's community. A lot of things rotate around the families' participation in schools. They tend to see the kids more than anybody else. And so I feel like they're super important because sometimes they're the first ones to see, problems. Sometimes they're the first ones to hear about it. And I just wish we had more involvement with them reaching out for help, to deal with, hey, we're pretty sure their utilities have been turned off, but sometimes I feel like school is kind of a closed institution and they tend to, and I was guilty of this when I worked for the school. We try and fix things within our own house. And I really feel like the more people that have expertise in a lot of different areas that can be brought in to help, the quicker things get handled. And then possibly Anita and her group never get called because it's been resolved. And the other thing is no one person can know every resource in Southeast Kansas. And so the meeting of the minds during our chat is pretty amazing. And not only are those people helping, but we're all learning at the same time that this could be a resource. Yeah. And so we all wish schools would be more involved. We don't ask for names, just the general locality so we know what resources to put in. And then I really feel like those individuals that participate could go back and then help, say, like in a SIT meeting or, when they have meetings on concerns with kids. I just feel like we're adding knowledge to everybody that participates.
I'd like to follow up on that quickly. We know schools call PRC because they're worried about a family. They know that if they call PRC, that somebody at DCF is going to go out and take a look at that family. If a call comes in and it is a family in need of assessment, we generally have about 7 days to go out and assess the family. And that 7 days, if the family's at a critical point, that's a long time. So agencies working together, the beauty is that it's immediate. So a school has a worry about a child or a family, they put that on there before the end of the day. I would say that they'll have a pretty good list of resources. Somebody did ask in chat, schools they run across difficulty with DCF resources being full. That is very true. We do have limits on our family preservation, on our family first services. But the important piece to know about that is for us to help through family first or family preservation, we have to open a case. And that's traumatic for a family. Again, taking time off work to attend meetings, advocating on behalf of yourself, kind of puts them on the defensive. All kinds of reasons why DCF doesn't like to open a case on a family unless we absolutely have to, because we know all of these community resources exist without a referral to DCF. So our goal is to get teachers, community members, counselors quick access to resources, not having to call the PRC. Absolutely want to get involved in a family's life if there's a safety concern, if there's abuse or neglect. We want our staff to focus on those cases, and when we have so many FINAs coming in, our staff get pulled away from the more serious, intensive situations. So again, we want this to be quick, easy, and supportive for you and your family.
And I'd like to add something there is there are a lot of us that are on agencies working together that can go out pretty quickly. A lot of times we will put in the chat, hey, send me an email. This sounds like something I can help with. Or I know, and there are a lot of agencies in Southeast Kansas that can do home visits. And so quite often there's a number of us that can get out there faster and do direct service with the family right then and there, if we feel like that needs to happen. And to be honest with you, the speed that kind of stuff happens because of us using a digital platform is pretty amazing, because you've all played phone tag with other agencies, or you don't know what agencies to call, so you got to call somebody else and wait. And this is, I mean, we've gotten chats before, requests for help, that somebody's been out the next day to help them with filling out paperwork, grants for housing, helping them with the, Title VIII applications and stuff. So I think that's one of the good things. And I think it's something that people need to realize, that we don't always just talk about it on the chat. Quite often somebody goes out.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I know we could talk about all this all day, because we're all so excited by this work.